What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, this is TWA Motorsports, and today we are working on the Sierra again, but we are doing a tune-up, which is a much needed thing. Honestly, guys, I have been waiting on for a while, and look, it needs it. So today we are going to work on that. It's going to take me probably about a week to complete this, and you're going to see why. But let's talk about the things that we're going to replace and the things we're going to do. So look, when I buy something, generally I change the oil pretty quick after buying it. Now this one has been a little bit neglected. It is time for an oil change, but before we do that, I want to do a few other things. And besides the oil change, obviously we have some other boxes here. So let's talk about what we've got. Of course, like always, guys, I will list all this stuff that I'm using in the description down below. But let's start with the Seafoam. Look, guys, I am a true believer in this product. I've used it on just about everything in the shop at one point or another, and this is going to be no different. So we've got a couple different products by them: Seafoam, like oil and gas treatment, and then we have the Deep Creep is what they call it. It's like a top-end cleaner. Now GM actually sells a version of this because they use this as well, so you can pick that up also if you decide to go with the GM stuff. I think it's a little more pricey. Does the exact same thing. So that's that. And then I'm going to come back to that in just a second. We've got new Gates belts for this thing. Kind of has a squeak, and I'm thinking it's probably an idler pulley, but we're going to replace the belts. I was really wanting to do this when I did the electric fans because life's a little easier replacing it that way, but we're going to go ahead and do it now. Aside from that, guys, I don't have the oil and the filter up here. I will list that down below. I'm going to be using, which you'll see later, I generally use Mobil 1 530, and I use a Wix filter. I do have a Wix fuel filter because this is a 2003, so it is a drive-by wire throttle body instead of a drive-by cable, but it still has the older fuel system with the return line and a serviceable filter. So we have that. We have new spark plugs from NGK, and we have new MSD wires. So if you guys remember in the last video or a few videos back, the spark plug wires are actually touching the headers here. I wanted to go with MSD because it gives that ability to bend the end around, and you'll see a little later in the video when we get to that point. But that is kind of the stuff that we are going to be replacing in today's video. What I wanted to talk about going back to the Seafoam, and the reason this video is going to take me about a week, is because I like to do Seafoam in the gas. Obviously we can just pour that in, it's not a big deal, but Seafoam in the oil is what I also like to do. So you want to put however many ounces to quarts this thing holds. So it holds about 5 quarts. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 5 ounces of this in the oil, and I want to do that and run it for about 200 to 250 miles before I actually drain the oil. So obviously, you know, starting here, I'm not going to go out and drive it 250 miles or 200 miles or whatever and then come back. So I'm going to let my son drive this for, you know, the week, and then I'll probably drain the oil and then continue with this video, but you'll all see it in this. But so let's get started. I think we are going to start with the Seafoam treatment. I'm going to start with this guy. I'm going to pour one of these whole containers in the gas tank. I'm going to pour 5 ounces of this in the oil, and then we're going to move on to this. We'll probably go to the belts next, and then we're going to wait and do the oil change, the filter at the same time. Same thing with this. So let's get started. Now, starting right back here is where we're going to start. You could probably use a funnel for this, guys, but I think we have enough room to just do it like this. We do. So we're going to pour a whole container of this in the fuel tank, and this is about 3/4 of a tank. It's supposed to be kind of an ounce per gallon. I don't really, guys, look, you can pour it into a whole tank, or I like to use it at like a half or just a little over. To me, it does the same job. So that's step one. Now let's see if I think I've got a measuring cup out here so we can measure off 5 ounces, and we're going to pour it directly into the crankcase. I did actually have a measuring thing out here, so we're going to try to pour that into the engine. All right, and we're going to seal that back up, and this is where we're going to do that driving period for 250 miles. But before we do that, I'm going to move on to this deep clean next and show you kind of how that works. So on to the deep clean. Here's what you need to do. The engine's hot, just got back from town with it. The engine needs to be warm. Now, I'm gonna open the garage door because we don't wanna smoke ourselves out of here, but we need to open this thing up. And normally how this works, guys, and you've seen me do this a little bit differently in the past, I've decided to do it a little different going forward, but how this works is it's got this piece right here and the straw, and it's supposed to go in the intake. So you're supposed to undo your intake, loop this straw through, tighten your intake back down. Well, on the 5.3s, the way the placement is, it just doesn't work really well. So what I'm going to do, and I'm gonna do this for a couple reasons. One, I don't have any help today. And so I'm gonna take it loose right here. This goes back to the back. This is your, goes to your brake booster. So it allows vacuum to come through there. So another reason why I like to do it here is there's a big opening that's gonna give us a little bit of a vacuum leak. Couple things, we can spray it in there, and it's gonna bring the RPMs up to compensate. So normally when you're spraying this in, you wanna keep it around 2,000 RPM. Well, because this is an electronically controlled throttle body, I really need somebody else in the truck in order for that to happen. But if I take it off here, then I can spray the entire contents in this, and it's gonna raise the RPM at the same time. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm gonna show you guys that process. I'm gonna pop the garage door open. I'm gonna spray this entire thing, and I actually have another can with a little bit left in it. I'm gonna spray both those cans in, and so what we wanna do is we wanna spray this in until it completely is empty. And then once it's empty, you need to shut the truck off and let it set for about 10 minutes for that stuff to kind of soak in. And then we'll probably get that big smoke show like you normally get when you seafoam a vehicle. You see, I've got both my containers here. I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing off of here, which I probably could do it by hand, but I'm just gonna pull it to where I've just about got it off there, and then I'm gonna go ahead and start it. Once I pull it off, then we're gonna go ahead and start spraying this stuff in there. Just put these. So you can see once I got finished spraying this stuff in there, I went ahead, plugged that back up and shut the truck off. The truck almost died actually. So we're gonna let it set for about 10 minutes. And what we may do is we may just tackle the belt while we're sitting here waiting. I don't know if I have enough time to do that. You know what, I take that back. We're just gonna let it set for 10 minutes and then we're gonna start it back up. And like I said, guys, it's probably gonna make quite a bit of smoke. It's been just a little over 10 minutes at this point. And so what I'm going to do, guys, is I figured I'd set my camera back here. It may be a little bit troublesome to start. It may I don't know if you guys heard it. Well, actually I sped that video up, but it almost died when I hooked that back up. But I wanna start it up. You're gonna see a lot of smoke. I'm gonna try to immediately get it out of the shop. And then I'm gonna take it for a drive until the smoke clears up. But you guys are gonna see when I first start it up and while I'm backing it out, how much smoke this thing is going to make. And I really don't want to do that in my shop. So I'm going to try to start it, get it out of the shop, and like I said, drive it until the smoke clears up. Quite a bit of the smoke, as you can see. So let's get this thing, let's drive it down the road, and I won't take you guys with me. It's gonna be, I've been pulled over before, people thinking my truck was on fire. So I'm just gonna take it here around. I live out in the country, so I could take it around where it's not gonna bother anybody. And then we'll bring it back in and get on those belts. We are back from what I would call a spirited drive. All the smoke is gone. It probably didn't even go 2 miles before the smoke completely cleared up. Guys, I think this is probably, if a motor hasn't been taken care of and the oil changed and it doesn't have a catch can on it, might not be a bad idea to do this every oil change. And it doesn't take a lot of time. I like doing it. Something satisfying about it. To me, it actually, and maybe it's in my head, but it feels like it has a little better throttle response now. So I think if you keep cleaning, and then you're keeping up with the maintenance like you're supposed to, I think it probably is a little more beneficial. So I think we're gonna move on to the belts now. I'm gonna start it up and let you guys listen to this squeak. I'm not 100% sure that it's the belt. We're gonna replace them anyway because they look older, but I may start it up and let you guys hear it for a second. Let's start it up and see if we can hear this squeak. I'm gonna crack my garage door too. You guys hear that squeak? Hopefully you can hear that. So one of the ways you can test this is you can just pull the belt off altogether. Now, I don't recommend running it very long like that, but that may be what we start with to make sure that it's a belt. Now, if it's a tensioner, if you took the belt off, it would go away as well. So maybe, I tell you what, we're not even gonna mess with that. We're just gonna take the belt off and replace it with a new one, because either way, we're not gonna know if it's a tensioner. Once we put the belt on, if it still squeaks, then we'll know. The removing the belt will let you know if you've maybe got a cam bearing or a lifter making the squeak as opposed to the belt, I suppose. I really don't think it's that far back in the motor, but it could possibly be. Now look, I said that I was wanting to wait until we had the electric fans on to do a belt, just because it does make life easier. There's not all this junk in front. You don't have the manual fan to deal with. But just to make my life easier, since we don't have electric fans yet, I'm gonna pull it off here. The intake. Man, that thing sits on there too. There's that, and then we're gonna pull it off here and get this completely out of the way, just to give us a little better access. This thing takes up so much room, and it's right in the middle of what we need to get to. Sometimes these things are a pain to get off too. Just be careful. So once we get this guy loose and out of the way, then I'll show you where we need to get the belt off. For some reason my camera wasn't recording, but I used a 15mm right here once that intake's out of the way. And I just swung this over, and then that gave me the ability to pull the belt off. And I've still got to thread it out of here, but that's how you get the top one off. And you do have to do this one first, and you have to take the AC belt off second, and then just the opposite when we're going back together. And if you guys have no idea which way the belt routes, you can look at if you still have your diagram here, mine's really faded, but that tells you if you forget which way. It will come off without taking, obviously, the fan off. It's just a little more cumbersome. So now that we've got that one loose, I'm gonna thread it out of there, and we'll go underneath and see if we can see how we take the bottom belt off. Now for this bottom belt, guys, I did lift a little bit, not completely off the ground yet, but wanted to be able to show you guys what we're dealing with here. So you can see the other tensioner, you actually stick a 3/8 drive in that tensioner, so you can see it right there. And once you do that, you can slide the belt off the AC unit and the actual harmonic balancer. So you can see why this one has to go on first but has to come off last, is because it sets the closest to the engine. Let's take a look at these belts up close. So the drive belt looks pretty decent, but look at this one. Definitely needed replaced. That one is terrible. It's probably really close to breaking. This one looks quite a bit newer, but I notice I like to kind of crease them, and then you can see any cracks. This one's just starting to crack, and so this one for sure needed replaced. But you know what I'm gonna do? Since I take that back. I was gonna start it up, but I'd have to put the intake back on. We're just gonna go ahead and put the AC belt back on, and just the reverse process, guys. It needs to go on first, and then we'll get back up top and put the other one on. Got the new one on. Guys, it kind of helps if you go kind of put it up over things from the top, and then finish it out on the bottom. But we've got it in place. I like to go around the ledges, making sure everything's seated properly. You know, it'll kind of self-align if you're off maybe one rib, but sometimes it'll also shred the belt. So I like to try to make sure it's in all the grooves, which I did. I went around the crank and the AC unit itself, and of course it's setting on the tensioner pulley. So now back up to the top to get the other one on. Now back up top, following, you know, kind of the faded diagram that we have right here. Hopefully you guys can see that. You're just trying to put it back in the way it came out. Guys, it's really hard for me to show you this, so I generally start at the crank and work my way up. But yeah, let's get this thing on here. Since I couldn't show you, let me try to describe it. I generally start with the crank down there at the very bottom. The crank on the left-hand side, as we're standing in front of the truck, comes up to the idler bracket, or the idler. From the other side, it goes underneath, okay, so it wraps back up to the left, goes around the water pump. From the water pump, it goes down to the power steering. From the power steering, it comes up to the alternator, and then under this idler pulley here in the center. The idler pulley or the water pump are the two easiest ones to slide it on. That's how you slide it on. So once you pull the tensioner over with the 15mm, it helps if you have somebody kind of holding tension. My son came out here and was holding some tension on this, and that definitely helps. So once we do that, swing the idler over, you can slide it on the pump or this other stationary idler. But now I'm gonna go ahead, put the intake back on, and we're gonna start it up and see if our squeak went away. He's gonna start this thing, got it all back together, got the intake back on. I'm just gonna make sure that the belt lines up, doesn't fly off. Sometimes it may be a good idea if you don't feel like you've got it lined up to stand back, because it could hit you in the face. But go ahead and start it up. Let's see if our squeak went away. Sure seems like it. I heard a little bit of a squeak there at the beginning, but maybe that was just the initial junk getting off. Maybe there's something on the pulley. All right, guys, we're gonna continue, I guess, with the spark plugs or the oil change. We have about, a little less than 200 miles since we put the Seafoam in the oil. And so now, guys, let's go ahead and get that stuff drained. I know I have a leak down there, so we're gonna take a look at that while we're under there too, but I'm gonna grab a couple tools. Got my oil drain pan. We're gonna get the oil draining, and then we're gonna obviously put new in it, but then we'll move on to the plugs and wires. But let's crawl under there and see what we're looking at. I've got a big mic on my camera, so it makes it kind of hard to get in close spaces, but let's crawl back here and take a look. So you can see we've got obviously a little bit of leak from the pan, it looks like, so the pan gasket, which maybe one of these days we'll address that. It can be replaced by removing this cross member right here, but on back to the back, I think we really have a rear main leak, so you can see all the oil on the back side of this thing, but you can also see the plug. So we're gonna get the plug out, and I don't know, this looks like some sort of cheapy filter. We're gonna be replacing that. This says USA brand, I don't even know. We're gonna be replacing that with the wicks. So let's get this draining. I have a tool that fits, I don't know if it'll fit this filter, but we're gonna try it. I know it fits the wicks, but let's get it. I want to drain as much out as possible. You can see I've got it down there draining, got the filter off as well. A couple things you need to check out, guys. One is this guy. So I don't know, this is obviously aftermarket because the factory has it built into the bolt. So I'm gonna go ahead and reuse this. I don't have another washer, one of these, but it looked kind of worn out. So the next oil change, I need to write this on my parts list. I'd like to order a GM one. For a couple reasons. The GM one has a magnet on the end, and like I said, the gasket is built into the bolt. So I'm gonna obviously reuse that one. And other than that, you need to make sure that the little ring on your oil filter, so the rubber ring on the top side, comes off with the filter. And then, guys, I always like to pre-fill my filter. So I've got my filter over here. I like to use wicks. I'm using Mobil 1 for oil, and wicks XP or non-XP, it really doesn't matter, to be honest with you, but I've got it sitting here because I poured some oil in it already. I like to have, especially when they mount upside down like this, so you have the ability to pour oil in it. And then I take a little bit here and rub around this ring. So I'm gonna go ahead, I wanted to drain as much as possible. It's been draining for about 15 minutes. Let's go ahead and get this back in and the actual bolt. Now I've got the filter on here. I'm still letting it's dripping a little bit, but I'm gonna take some brake clean and clean a little bit off the pan. But I was gonna show you guys, check out the leak right here. You can see that the rack is starting to leak. So I'm gonna check the fluid in it, but at some point, looks like we're gonna have to replace a rack. It's never ending, you know? But either way, I'm gonna go ahead, get the plug in. I may let it drip a little bit longer here. And then, like I said, I'm gonna clean, I'm not gonna go crazy, but I'm gonna clean the bottom of the pan, you know, just kind of make it look a little better, and it'll help me possibly see exactly where my leak's coming from next time. Now that we got everything tightened up, you can see that I've moved on to the other side. So I jacked, now this is a 2003, so it's a last year for the fuel filter that's serviceable. But I wanna replace it since I'm doing all this other stuff. So you can see I've got quite a bit of lean on this truck. I've got 2 jack stands, an extra jack, and then another one in the front, guys. Be very safe when you're doing this, but we need to swing under there and get to the filter. So the filter is kind of in between these 2 jack stands that I've got here. And look, you're gonna get gas on you doing this, but hopefully you guys can see it right here. That is what we're after. So we're gonna have to go get a stationary nut. I believe it's 3/4. I don't remember, but you can see there's one on each side. So you need to hold the stationary nut. Hopefully you guys can see that. The stationary nut on the actual filter itself, and then you have to unthread the line. So I'm gonna be replacing this with the wicks as well. And guys, look, like I said, you're gonna get gas on you. There's no way around it. Sometimes I like to crack the line open, then kind of let it bleed off for a little bit, and then I get back under here and finish. I've cracked both those lines loose with a 17 on the jam, well, I say it's 17, sorry, 16, and a I'm trying to do it without getting gas all over my like face. So I've got the front one threaded out. You can see it's starting to leak. So 16 on the inside, 20 on the stationary nut. And so I'm gonna try to thread this out without like being up in there. And then I've got my replacement one to go back in, and obviously guys, it goes back in. You just kind of have to push this thing out up here. I'm gonna try to let it drain for a bit. I don't like gas in my face or my eyes. I know that's probably crazy, but we're gonna get this old one out. I was trying to push it out and that wasn't working, so I'm gonna go ahead and take the bracket loose. Just two 13s on the outside of the frame here. You can see those guys. So we'll get those loose, and then the metal lines, I don't want to bend them and try to push that out that way. So let's just take this out. Then we'll have the filter out and we can take a look at how the new one needs to go in. Of course, that's up in there where I can't reach it with the wiring, but we'll get it out of there. Unfortunately, the way I thought it was going to work didn't work because the ABS and those fuel lines there all kind of tied up into that bracket. So I was able to pull it out of the frame a little bit and then push our old filter out. So now all we need to do is make sure we get the new one in the correct direction, which it should say flow on it, and hopefully tighten this all back up. I got the new one in, and I ended up coming in from the back here and pushing the new one in. That's the old one laying on the floor, but look at all the fuel we spilled. Like I said, guys, this is one of those things I wish I would have done on my lift so I could have showed you a little bit of the process. I know I kind of just showed you, hey, I'm taking it out, hey, I put it in, but I've got it in there. And so now all I need to do, I've already snugged down the lines. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten those. You're gonna wanna watch for a leak when you first start this right here. And so I've got, like I said, I'm gonna snug these down, and don't over tighten them, just get them really snug. And then as far as the outside here, I need to put my 13 millimeters back in and tighten those up. Got this thing back on the ground, and I'm gonna go ahead and pour the oil in. I don't know if you guys are like me, but I'm a little forgetful sometimes. And I would sure hate to not pour the oil in and then try to start this thing after we get the plugs and wires on, which is what I'd like to tackle next. But guys, I'll list this oil in the description. This is Mobil 1 530 synthetic is what I've always used on daily drivers for the most part. I'm gonna pour there's about 4.5 quarts left. This thing's supposed to take about 4.5 to 5. Just from past experience, I pour the whole thing in, all 5 quarts. You know, obviously we use some to put in the filter, but we'll obviously start it back up. I'll probably start it before I go onto the plug wires and just make sure that we're good, and to make sure that we don't have any leaks down there on our fuel filter. So we got that in there. We'll cap it off, and then off camera, guys, I'll just double check and make sure that we're good on, as far as adding. If I have to add any, I'll let you know, but let's start it up and make sure before we move on to the plug wires. I'm gonna try to put you guys a little closer where you can see what's going on in that process, or at least part of it. Before starting it, I did actually have to put an extra 1/2 quart in. So 5.5 is where we're at right now with the filter. Guys, it's gonna be a little hard to start because obviously we drained all the fuel out of the line, both the line that comes up to the rail and to the tank. So don't be alarmed if it's hard to start, but just keep an eye down here on the driver's side, obviously under the seat, to make sure that you've got everything snugged up the way it's supposed to. But I'm gonna go ahead and start it, and then we're gonna check the oil again. All right, no leaks. So let's check this and see how far off we are. I will tell you guys that oil that we drained out was dirty. I'm gonna continue to do this Seafoam process with the oil. Like 200 miles before a change, I'm gonna put that stuff in and then we'll drain it out. I'd like to drain it out hot. We are still about a 1/2 quart low, guys, so I'm guessing this thing takes roughly 6.5 quarts. I was for sure it took 5, but I may be wrong. Anyway, let's get another 1/2 quart or so in it, and we'll check it again. And I think, guys, we'll move on at that point. I won't bore you anymore with that. We'll move on to the plugs and plug wires. On to the plugs and plug wires, guys. So remember I said there's a reason why I wanted to replace these. The thing's running pretty good. Also notice that we're missing a bolt on the very back cylinder. I'm assuming it broke off. But look, these things are touching. This one has the little protective boot on it down there, the little metal boot. But see, this one is actually laying on the header. That was not the alarming one. The alarming one was this one right here. And so far, you know, I don't have any misfires, but look, this one is actually melted. You can see that it's laying, the boot of it is laying up against the header, and it's actually melted to the header. So I'm gonna switch over to MSD wires, which I'll list in the description down below. But honestly, guys, there's not a lot to show you here as far as pulling these off. It's about the easiest plug change and plug wire change anyway that a guy can do. So I'm gonna go through and just yank all of these old plug wires off, and then we'll see how hard it's gonna be to attach the new ones, or get the plugs out. Check that out. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, they held up. That's one good thing. I am going to try to be reusing the boots, little metal boots, but now I'm going to go grab my spark plug socket. And I think, guys, the headers generally from Speed Engineering are somewhat decent as far as you can see the plug there. You may have to experiment. I'll show you which one of the extensions I'm using, because sometimes you got to go back and forth between like a super short one and a little longer one, but they don't look like they're going to be hard to access. The back one is always the toughest, but with headers on it, it's not too bad. And when I say experiment, I've got two of these little short ones like this. Sometimes you need those together, or the next size up, which is about, what, a 3-inch. Sometimes these two together are just what you need and not this one, sometimes this little one. So you just kind of got to swap back and forth getting these things loose. And like I said, I was going to try to hang you up here and show you, but I mean, look guys, I'm just trying to pull the plugs out. So I don't really think, I mean, you can obviously see where they're at. If I have any issues, I'll cut in and let you know, but then once I get one out, we'll take a look at it together and we'll talk about what we're replacing it with. So I got the first one out. And you know, it doesn't look great, but what I did notice is, guys, these are supposed to be gapped around 40 thousandths. This guy's gapped at 60 thousandths. Now it is an aftermarket NGK, and it looks like a platinum. And so I'm actually replacing with an NGK, but I'm gonna gap them to 40 thousandths. Now, normally I don't use a platinum NGK, but because this is a daily driver and I don't wanna be replacing them all the time, I'm gonna sacrifice a little bit. Like a TR55 really is the best plug, guys, but it's a copper core. It idles the best. It actually probably gets the best mileage. The problem is, after about 5 to 10,000 miles, they're hammered, they're done. And so I just decided to go with the platinum just to last a little longer. It's not like it's a big deal to change them, but in my opinion, it's worth it. So when you take these out, they should be pre-gapped, but I'm gonna make sure that they're at the 40 thousandths that they're supposed to be, and they are. You know, platinum plugs are a little bit different. They have to be, you got to be a little more careful that you don't jack up the tip when you're gapping them. So this is at 40 thousandths. Now the other thing is, I always use anti-seize. I noticed doesn't look like there's a bit of anti-seize on there, guys. We are going into an aluminum head with, this is steel. So it's always a good idea to put a little bit of anti-seize on it. So I'm gonna go grab some of that, dab just a little bit on here. You can use like the little, the brush, that's what I've got. I don't love that, but they make one that's kind of like a glue stick, and that one works best because you can just kind of thread it around there. This is the stuff that I use. And honestly, guys, I generally just use the paintbrush part. I can just roll it along the edge, and that'll get me enough to kind of coat it to get it installed. As far as putting them in, I like to start them by hand just to make sure we don't cross thread. These are really, really easy to cross thread. So once I get them spun in and I'm comfortable with the way they're going in, then I'll put the ratchet back on it. And guys, there is a torque spec. I want to say it's like 11 foot-pounds, but I just get them snug. Don't over tighten them. You know, it's not required to get them like super tight. 11 foot-pounds is not very much. And I may be off there, maybe like 18, but I'm pretty sure it's 11. I haven't used my spark plug socket in a while, so it's kind of snug. There we go. And if at any point something doesn't feel right, stop. Don't strip these guys out. That is a huge mess, guys, and we're tearing the whole motor apart just to get that done. So now that we got that, let's go grab the spark plugs and look at what we're dealing with there. Let's take a look at what we had. This is what we had. I'm hoping they're long enough. I think they will be, because these were a little long. But you can see the ends of them, guys. They bend. And so I am going to use, these are MSD, and I said plugs, plug wires is what I meant. I am going to use these, and then we'll bend it to keep it away from the heat of that. Now, these have the 2 and the 4 and the 6 and the whatever snapped onto them. You don't have to do that. It's kind of pointless, but they were already on there when I got them. So we're gonna snap this on, and then we're gonna kind of bend it around, and then I'll show you guys a little closer what it looks like. I'm just gonna kind of work my way through, put a plug in, put a plug wire on, and go through this side and then the other side. You can see I've got that thing on, and look, we are nowhere near touching now like we were before. And so you can see how much bend that plug wire has, even with the end on it. So I know it's kind of controversial whether to use the ends or not. I like to use them. It just kind of keeps down the heat. Some people say it like holds heat and bakes us in, but guys, these are aluminum, so they don't get like quite as hot. You can use them, you don't have to. I choose to if I can get them in there. So we're just gonna move on through now. Make sure that you get a positive snap on the bottom one. The top one you can kind of tell when it's fully seated up here, but the bottom one, it always makes me crazy when like somebody drives by outside my shop when I'm trying to snap it in, because I'm listening for it to snap. You can hear it click onto the plug. So I'm gonna go ahead and run through the rest of these, guys. If I have any issues, I will cut back in, but if not, we should be finished relatively shortly. It doesn't take really long. Now, this is gonna depend on whether you have manifolds or not, but or headers. On the headers, I was able to use this little short extension on that very back one, and guys, that's the hardest one to get to. They come in, you know, from an angle, and so you know, you're kind of up against the firewall, but this guy right here, this little short extension, definitely makes the difference. So I'm down to the last one on this side. Completely finished on this side, and look how much clearance we have now. Definitely way better, guys, and you know, we're probably going to pick up a little bit just based on the fact new plugs, a little better conducting wires than those junk ones that were on it. So now I got to do the other side. This is really the hard side, honestly. We now have both sides completely finished, and guys, I did start it up. I have no misfires. It runs super smooth, and no issues whatsoever. So anytime, you know, when you get done with this, if you start it up, it's kind of a good idea to have no light on so you can see if you're getting any arcing anywhere, like if you didn't get a spark plug wire all the way on or something, or if you get a misfire or a SES light, that's generally a telltale sign, guys, that you don't have one hooked completely on. Like I said, I like for it to be super quiet in here and then listen for that positive snap, especially on the bottom. But now we don't have anything touching any of the headers on either side. It looks really good, and you know, I'm probably going to pick up a little bit of performance in the fact that the plugs are gapped a little bit differently, the fact that those are a little better conducting wire than what the cheapy stuff that was on it. Now, we're not talking like huge differences. I don't think you'll probably even feel it, but I think it will help, especially on mileage and whatnot. Same thing with the filter, guys. I dumped the filter out and there was a bunch of junk in it. So, you know, maybe we'll pick up a little bit on that, maybe some mile per gallon, but ultimately we are finished. We got a lot accomplished with the Seafoam. Guys, I think I'm gonna really do that every time I do the oil change. I like 200 miles before, I'm gonna pour some in, drain it out until we get this thing kind of cleaned up and back to where I would like to have it. I may pour some in the fuel as well. I don't know if we'll do the intake one. Probably should, because these things hold a ton of oil in the intake. Ultimately, at some point, I know I've said this a lot, but I want to get a catch can for this thing to help alleviate some of that oil pooling in the intake. But anyway, guys, hopefully you did enjoy this video. More stuff to come on this, obviously. I really want to take it out and do another draggy test, because I'm going to put electric fans on it. We're going to put an intake on it. So that is coming very soon. I think there's a few other things I have planned. I think my hood's getting close to being finished and my tailgate. So either way, guys, you got to stay tuned. And if you did like this video, ultimately, guys, go down there and hit that thumbs up button. If you are not subscribed, you got to go down there, hit that subscribe button. Of course, while you're down there doing all of that stuff, commenting, subscribing, and all that, ring that bell icon. That notifies you every time we drop a new video, guys. And stay tuned to see what we work on next.